Emerging research is drawing associations between the rates of premarital sex, cohabitation relationships, and divorce rates. For instance, Teichmann used data from the 1995 National Survey of Family Growth to determine the impact of premarital sex and cohabitation on marriage dissolution. The author notes that marriages preceded by cohabitation are 33% more likely to fail, while those whose partners have engaged in premarital sex being 166% more likely to end in divorce. Teichmann asserts that premarital sex or cohabitation limited to a woman's future husband does not influence the risk of divorce. However, women who reported having more than one premarital sexual partner presented greater likelihood of marital dissolution. The author argues that multiple premarital sexual partners instills attitudes and beliefs that undermine the stability of marriages. The age of first sexual encounter is negatively associated with the risk of divorce, with women who delay sexual debut presenting lower divorce risks. The rates of premarital sex and cohabitation are of particular interest because of the conflicts surrounding teenage sex education and the common goal of marital stability. The widespread campaign surrounding personal choice, especially when it comes to sexuality, presents the ground for seriously debating the association between premarital sex and the health of relationships. Bumpass and colleagues analyzed issues surrounding marital dissolution using data from the National Survey of Families and Households of 1987-88. The analysis uncovered that men seriously underreport dissolution, thereby raising the difficulty of studying male marriage-related patterns and histories. The factors that increase the risk of marital disruption according to the study include parental background factors, differences in partner characteristics, and partner activity within the first year of marriage. Women who got married at a young age, with low education, with a cohabitation history, and those whose partner was married at some point present the greatest risk of divorce. Marital stability is also reduced by male unemployment, parental family disruption, and education or religious heterogamy. Bumpass and Liu examined the increased cohabitation in America and uncovered that the stability of long-term relationships has significantly decreased, with children being increasingly born to cohabiting families. Between 1980 and 1994, the births to unmarried women in cohabiting setups rose from 29% to 39%. As a result, 40% of children spend some time in cohabiting setups, with these children presenting greater likelihood of dissolving future relationships. Jose and colleagues assessed whether premarital cohabitation affects marital stability and quality. The authors uncovered that cohabitation negatively impacted the quality and stability of marriage, but this risk was not present for those who cohabited with their future marital partner. Long-term cohabitors who do not end up getting married have less stable and lower quality relationships. Lichter and colleagues maintain that the translation of first births into cohabitation or marriage reduces the stability of the unions. This phenomenon is supported by the higher dissolution rates for cohabitation relationships that were preceded by conception. Only the most committed cohabitation relationships end up in marriage. The risk of dissolving unions preceded by conception is associated with the hastiness of the related decisions, the destabilizing effects of unplanned pregnancies. Pregnancies disrupt the positive growth of non-marital relationships, and the absence of child-free adjustment into moving in together. Stykes and Guzzo assert that the birth of a child could negatively impact the functioning of a relationship, especially if one or both partners did not intend to become parents. The authors argue that a third of the first marital births are unintended by at least one of the involved parents, with the birth being unintentional for the father presenting greater risk of union dissolution. Guzzo argues that cohabitations formed after 1995 present greater likelihood of dissolving, with those formed after 2000 presenting the least likelihood of transitioning into marriage. This argument is supported by Dush and colleagues who note that the dissolution risk of cohabitation increased in the 80s and the 90s, with this increase being more rapid in the 2000s. The increased risk of dissolving cohabitation unions has been accompanied by a drop in dissolving marriages. The divorce rate for 25 to 29-year-olds was 42% in the 80s and the 90s, while it was 36% around 2010. Amato lists growing up in households that lack consistently married parents, being in second or higher order marriages, marrying from a different race, having children from a previous union, especially mothers, premarital birth, a history of cohabitation with a different person, low level of education, experiencing poverty or unemployment, and getting into a union at an early age are some demographic and economic contributors to divorce. Notably, the author argues that incompatible cohabiting couples end up marrying because of the resultant pressure, and individuals easily settle for less in cohabiting than marriage partners. Interpersonal contributors to divorce include infidelity, violence, low commitment, diminished love or trust, and the lack of social support. Cohen and Manning, using data from the National Survey of Family Growth, maintain that serial cohabitors enter in such relationships early, report lower marital expectations. Women with more premarital sexual partners are more likely to cohabit, and such women report complex trajectories in their adult relationships. The continuous rise in the age of first marriages, the median for women being 26 years and for men being 28 years, provides greater opportunities for premarital sex. Cohen and Manning explain that cohabitors report lower relationship quality compared to married couples. While marriage signals the desirable characteristics possessed by a partner such as trustworthiness, productivity, independence, and maturity, the same is not applicable for cohabitation. Lamidi and colleagues observed that cohabitations formed between 2006 and 2013 lasted 18 months, while those formed in the 80s lasted an average of 12 months. The authors uncovered that lengthening cohabitation negatively affects the chances of transitioning into marriage. Kahn and London examined the relationship between premarital sex and the long-term risk of divorce among American married women between 1965 and 1985. The study tabulated results from the National Survey of Family Growth of 1988 and uncovered that women who engaged in premarital sex presented a greater risk of divorce than those who were married as virgins. Oliveira notes that the risk of divorce owing to engaging in premarital sex is not present for women who got married to their first and only partner. Kahn and London assert, and I quote, "After a variety of observable characteristics are controlled, non-virgins still face a much higher risk of divorce than virgins. However, when the analysis controls for unobserved characteristics affecting both the likelihood of having premarital sex and the likelihood of divorce, the differential is no longer statistically significant." These results suggest that the positive relationship between premarital sex and the risk of divorce can be attributed to prior unobserved differences, for example, the willingness to break traditional norms, rather than to a direct causal effect. Kahn and London maintain that women exposed to marital stability are less likely to engage in premarital sex. Lauman and colleagues maintain, and I quote, "For both genders, we find that the virgins have dramatically more stable first marriages. Those who are virgins at marriage have much lower rates of separation and divorce. Those who marry as non-virgins are also more likely, all other things being equal, to be unfaithful over the remainder of their life compared with those spouses who do marry as virgins." Forster and Heaton observed that the 60s and the 70s witnessed a reduction in the expectation to marry, remaining married, having children, and limiting sexual activity to marriage. This decline is associated with the invention of oral contraception in the 60s and the legalization of abortion in the 70s. The availability of contraception and abortion inspired the sexual revolution that was characterized by the dramatic reduction of the cost of sex. Prior to the revolution, women prized sexual activity highly because engagement was almost synonymous to consenting to be a parent. This sexual responsibility in terms of child care for women translated to withholding sex for long-term commitment. The reduction of the cost of sex following the sexual revolution was associated with the fact that all the restrictions to engagement were eliminated in the 60s and 70s. The revolution also faded out shotgun marriages where premarital sexual activity resulting in pregnancy was resolved by marriage. Forster and Heaton explain that the rise in divorce and decline in marriages is greatly associated with sexual permissiveness and family liberalism, both of which contribute to marital disruption. The 60s and 70s also witnessed an exponential rise in egalitarian couples. Forster and Heaton maintain that couples where the husband holds egalitarian ideologies are at reduced risk of divorce because the man is family-oriented, while those where the woman holds egalitarian beliefs are at increased risk of divorce because she places less emphasis on family life by focusing mostly on economic activities outside the home. As such, traditional husbands and egalitarian wives present the greatest risks of divorce. Paik evaluated the impact of adolescent sexuality on the risk of marital dissolution using data from the National Survey of Family Growth of 2002. The outcomes of the study indicated that sexual debut during one's adolescence years does affect marital stability, but subsequent premarital activity does not. Noteworthy, sexual debut whether wanted or unwanted before age 16 increases the risk of marital dissolution, thereby indicating the effect of timing and context of sexual activity on long-term marital stability. Multiple lifetime sexual partners and a history of abuse predict a decline in relationship quality, which is a correlate of instability. Oliveira observes that women with a first sexual encounter outside marriage are 34% more likely to divorce, The risk does not exist for women whose first encounter was with their future husband. Women who became sexually active as teenagers are only 41% likely to have stable relationships. Women who delay sex to their early 20s report up to 69% likelihood of marital stability. Women whose first encounter is with their husband report 80% likelihood of marital stability. Women with more than one premarital partner have a 54% likelihood of having a stable relationship. Women with 6 to 10 premarital partners report a 17% likelihood of having a stable marriage, and the risk of divorce reduces by 8% for every year that sexual activity is delayed. Couples who cohabit before marriage present a 33% more likelihood of divorce, but the risk is lower for women who have only cohabited and had premarital intercourse with their husband. Particularly, women who have cohabited and had intercourse with a man who is not their husband are 166% more likely to be divorced, with those who cohabited twice being 109% more likely to be divorced. Having multiple non-marital sexual partners minimizes the need for men to get married because coitus is no longer restricted to the constructs of a committed relationship. Wolfinger and Perry explain that multiple partners for women, in what is often termed as a double standard in the context of promiscuity, purportedly minimizes their desirability for marriage. The authors maintain that data collected from the National Survey of Family Growth uncovered that women with more sexual partners were less likely to get married compared to virgins. Data from the National Longitudinal Survey of the Youths completed between 1997 and 2015 revealed that more non-marital sex partners only affects marriage rates in the short term or temporarily. Recent partners reduce the odds of marriage, but lifetime non-marital sex partners do not affect the rates of marriage. Wolfinger examined the relationship between the number of premarital sexual partners and the risk of divorce using data from the National Survey of Family Growth between 2002 and 2013. The findings suggest that there has been a decline in the number of women who have had only one sexual partner at the time of marriage. Particularly, 43% of women had only one premarital sexual partner in the 70s, with this number dropping to an average of 20% in the 2010s. The sexual revolution in the 60s and 70s, primarily following the invention of oral contraception and the legalization of abortion, significantly reduced the number of virgin brides. Notably, over half to two-thirds of women had a maximum of one premarital sexual partner in the 80s, with this number reducing to 5% in the 2010s. This number has been accompanied by a rise in the number of women with 10 or more premarital sexual partners from 2% in the 70s to 18% in the 2010s. Wolfinger uncovered that women with 10 or more lifetime sexual partners were most likely to divorce. Women with 3 to 9 lifetime sexual partners were less likely to divorce compared to those with 2, and those with 0 to 1 lifetime partners were least likely to divorce. 11% of marriages where the woman was married as a virgin were dissolved within 5 years in the 80s, with this rate dropping to 8% in the 90s, and 6% in the 2000s. The 5-year divorce rate for women with 2 premarital sexual partners was 28%. Higher than those with 10 or more at 18% in the 80s. The 5-year divorce rate for women with 2 lifetime partners rose to 30% in the 2000s, while those with 10 or more rose to 33%. The likelihood of divorce for women with 2 lifetime sexual partners is associated with the fact that they were more likely to have only one before their husband, which convinces them of the possibility of extramarital affairs. Having a single premarital sexual partner creates a lot of uncertainties, especially whether or not they married the right man. A lot of sexual partners increases the likelihood of baggage, including out-of-wedlock children and diseases. Noteworthy, Grabovats and colleagues note that women with 10 or more lifetime sexual partners are more likely to be diagnosed with a terminal illness, including cancer. Women married as virgins were far more likely to attend church every week, while those with multiple partners were least likely. Increased number of premarital sexual partners is associated with reduced happiness in marriage, which significantly contributes to divorce. The increased acceptability of premarital sex has adversely affected marital stability. Women with one premarital sexual partner are less likely to have a baby with another man, with getting married as a single mother reducing the likelihood of marital happiness. Wolfinger's updated publication of 2018 revealed that the chances of women being married to one life partner have remained consistent at 40% from the 60s. Women married as virgins report the lowest divorce rates. People with multiple premarital partners report low-quality unions. Multiple sex partners before marriage reduce the resultant quality in the case of women but not men. 65% of women who have only slept with their husbands report happy marriages, 52% of women with 6 to 10 marital partners report being happy, and 57% of women with 11 or more lifetime sexual partners report being happy. Having one partner appears to be more beneficial for men, with 71% of men with only one partner reporting being happy and the number reducing to 65% for men with two or more sexual partners. Christensen analyzed the impact of premarital sexual promiscuity on individuals' sexual satisfaction in marriage and found that a satisfying sexual relationship is a significant predictor of marital happiness. 87.7% of the male and 84.6% of the female respondents reported being extremely happy with their sex life in marriage. The findings of the study indicated that for every premarital sexual partner, the likelihood of reporting a satisfying marital sex life drops by 3.9%, with the male model being more significant at 5.3%. Black and Hispanic males were 8.9% less likely to report being sexually satisfied in their marriages. Families and family-oriented relationships focus largely on children, with little concern over what happens to their parents, a phenomenon that increases children's dependency on their parents. The attractiveness, or lack thereof, of marriage differs from one union to the next, thereby making it difficult to draw accurate generalized conclusions. Alvear explains that over 70% of Americans acknowledge divorce as a serious threat to familial values and should only be undertaken in extreme circumstances. The primary source of concern in the context is children, then the society at large. This concern is based on the fact that children with divorced parents or those whose parents never marry are more likely to experience economic, academic, and emotional problems. Alvear argues that economic issues account for half of the problems arising from single parenthood, with the rest coming from minimal supervision and residence mobility. Successful marriages are more important for low-income families for parents to continuously support their children to minimize federal involvement in child rearing. A reduction in the number of stable families translates into reduced private resources for children, as well as other vulnerable adults, such as the elderly. Alvear lists loss of wealth-building families as an economic opportunity cost of divorce. Marriages offer opportunities for people to love beyond their differences because of the underlying mutual dependencies, including financial, emotional, and physical dependence. Marriages promote freedom by providing chances for self-realization through the opportunities to make choices and enhance commitment. The world is under rigid routine and discipline, with the home being the only source of individualism and liberty. The standards surrounding marriage promote stability in a dynamic world, which contributes to the freedom discussed before. Alvear documents studies that support the economic, sexual, physical, and psychological benefits of marriage, with the potential costs of divorce including poor health, both physical and mental, and reduced productivity. Forster and Heaton assert that married people are generally happier than single ones because marriage impacts the general well-being of an individual positively, while divorce destroys reliable social networks. The authors also argue that the effects of divorce vary by gender, with divorced women reporting more illness than married ones and reduction in socioeconomic status by up to 30%. Divorce reduces women's income by half, while men's income increases after divorce. Alvear suggests that states could quote-unquote infringe into people's privacy to control their behaviors by formulating marriage-oriented initiatives seeking to reduce the prevalence of divorce and passing laws around premarital sex, cohabitation, teenage sex education, and contraception.